And let's begin chapter 7. Carter spent the day in the park reading the book that Mr. Vernon had given him. He had never owned a book before. As soon as he opened it, he was unable to remove his eyes from the simple black and white illustrations explaining magic tricks he once thought impossible. He pored over the drawings and the words from cover to cover. Then he began at the beginning and started to memorize the first trick. Before he knew it, the bell in the town clock tower had chimed 4 times. Looking up from the book, he discovered that mineral wells had come to life. A great many people of all shapes, sizes, and colors and ages walked along Main Street. The adults were carrying shopping bags filled with clothes and groceries and art supplies and antique knickknacks. The kids wandered home from school with heavy knapsacks on their backs. A large sign had been erected on an easel in front of the huge gazebo. It read, BB Basso's Carnival, in town for a limited time. Big top show tonight. Finale fantastic tomorrow at the Grand Oak Resort. See the world's largest diamond. 4 performers dressed in matching jackets with red and white vertical stripes, bow ties, and straw steam hats climbed up the steps to the gazebo's platform. There were 3 men and 1 was a woman. Although they all looked somewhat similar, each stood out from the next. One man was tall with a razor-sharp snout. Another was short with a curly mustache under a bulbous beak. The third man was medium height, his face was scruffy, and his belly spilled slightly over his belt buckle. The woman had a big smile with teeth that flashed an almost blinding white. Carter slipped his book into his satchel and walked over to watch. The 4 strangers hummed. Then, like spokes on a train, the 4 bobbed up and down in unison. Pock, pock, pick, pock, pick, pock, pick, pock. Look, a barbershop quartet, someone said. A circle of onlookers began to gather in front of the stage. Somehow the singers kept alternating the pocket rhythm the whole time they sang. What a town! What a town! What a marvelous town for a show! You have rings, you have gold, you have fortunes untold to blow. Hold your hats, peel your eyes, cause you're in for a surprise. One thing's for sure, we now gotta pure. Their hats raised in harmony, the 4 held the note so long the crowd began to clap. In unison, the singers wheezed for breath and comically before launching into a rhythmic chorus. Pick-pock, pick-pock, pick, 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 walk, 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 trick, trick, trick. Hats in their hands, the foursome descended the steps and fanned into the crowds. They danced with a tall woman wearing a pearl bracelet. They embarrassed a shy man who held up his hands in surrender. They blew kisses at a blushing lady with gold rings. They tweaked the nose of beaming pigtailed girls with a lollipop. The crowd continued clapping, many giving them loose change from their pockets and purses. Within moments, all 4 singers' hats were overflowing with coin bills. Pick-pock, quick, 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 bok, bok, bok. They flapped their arms and waddle stepped like crooning chickens back to the stage, where they dumped their hats into a dirty white sack marked with a big black dollar sign. But as Carter looked back at the crowd, his learned instinct kicked in. The tall woman no longer had her pearl bracelet. The shy man no longer had a watch. The blushing lady no longer had her earrings. The pigtailed girl no longer had her lollipop. The audience had been so impressed with the singing that they hadn't noticed the singers taking more than tips. When the pickpockets come to town, you're never going to guess what's going down in our sensational show. Part of the finale, the stripes in their jackets switched from red to black, and somebody pulled out a pop-up book. The show people now looked like jailbirds with their bag of money, and the crowd went wild. No one would have guessed their act wasn't a joke. They were crooks. They had robbed the watchers blind. Carter felt a pang in his side, but he ignored it. He didn't know these people. It's none of his business. Was it? Thank you, the residents and visitors of Mineral Wells, the pickpockets cried in unison. Come to BB Basso's Carnival and stay for his magic show at the big top, at the end of the night, and you will truly be amazed. Come his finale fantastic tomorrow night at the Grand Oak Resort, where you'll also see the world's largest diamond. One night only, not to be missed. Carter turned to leave when a voice from the crowd rose up. Wait, don't go. A brown-skinned boy with a tuxedo and a bow tie hat stepped in front of those gathered around the stage. Is that the end of your performance? That's the spirit, one of the pickpockets said. How about an encore, gang? The 4 stopped snapping their fingers, but the boys held up his hand. Please, he said, don't sing another note. My ears cannot take it. Carter thought the boy was part of the act until he saw the irritation and confusion flashing across the singers' faces. Stepping on stage, the boy reached inside his pants pocket. He jiggled his hand as if looking for keys or spare coins. Then he produced a violin bow far too long to have fit inside his pocket. The bow is exquisitely constructed of dark polished wood and tapered black ends, and strung with a ribbon of silvery horsehair. Carter's curiosity was snagged. The boy knew stage magic too, but how did he fit that bow into his pocket? You want to play something? Said the tall pickpocket. Be our guest. The foursome began to hurry off, but the boy pinned their bag of loot to the ground with his foot. Hey, get your own tips, kid, the pickpocket said with a scruffy face hissed. I don't want your money, the boy said, and my name is not Kid. My name is Theo Steinmeier. I wager that you will stay for my act. Theo's hair was dark and short, his eyes were thoughtful, and his long nose had a regal look to it. Carter traveled to the front row just in time to see a violin slide out of Theo's tuxedo jacket and into his left hand. Carter was good at sleight of hand, but Theo's moves were astounding. He immediately wished he could watch the move again in slow motion. Theo lifted the violin to his shoulder, rested his chin on his edge, and began to play. The money sack began to move. It seemed to dance in sync with Theo's violin music. The crowd began clapping again. Carter stared at the money bag shuffling away. It reminded him of Vernon's move that morning, making the playing dance card. But how did they do it? It wasn't magic. It had to be some kind of trick. There's a unique connection between each of us and our positions, Theo said as he played, his eyes fluttering nearly shut, as if under a spell. Carter couldn't tell if the boy was acting or if he really believed what he was saying. What a beloved object lost. It turns to its owner. The bag jerked across the stage until it leapt off onto the ground. Theo walked after it, the spectators moving aside to let him pass. The restless bag of loot came to attention in front of the tall woman, like a dog wanting to be pet. Ma'am, said Theo, playing more quietly, have you lost something? The tall woman looked inside the bag and shook her head no. The crowd became confused and began to whisper. The violinist began to sweat, but Carter understood. Theo was trying to help those who had been robbed, but he'd mistakenly assumed the pickpockets had placed the stolen goods in their loot bag. Carter eyed the singers, noticing a lollipop stick peeking out from the pickpocket's back pocket. Carter wondered about the violinist. Why had Theo been trying to help such a bunch of townsfolk by foiling the pickpocket singers? He obviously knew a little magic himself, but what was in it for him? None of my concern, Carter tried to tell himself. But was that true anymore? As the crowd began to mumble and ask questions, the violinist turned pale. The pickpockets started stalking toward Theo with red faces. The boy stumbled onto the trouble that Carter had been trying to avoid. Keep playing, Carter suddenly yelled, surprising himself. He made eye contact with the boy in the tuxedo and gave him a reassuring nod. Nervously, Theo began to play again, and the sack began dancing along with it. Carter pretended to dance, then bumped into each of the pickpockets one after the other. Isn't this music great? He shouted at them. The singers didn't notice what Carter was doing, but he was pickpocketing the pickpockets. Once the pickpockets' pockets were picked, 2 pickpockets picked, 3 pickpockets picked, 4 pickpockets picked. Say that 4 times fast. Go on, I'll wait. Carter winked at Theo to keep going. Continuing to dance throughout the crowd, Carter bumped into the tall woman, slipped her pearl bracelet back into her wrist, and barreled into the shy man. Slipping his watch onto his wrist, he knocked it into the pigtailed girl, plopping the lollipop back in her mouth. Plop! But the earrings! Carter had no idea how earrings worked. How could he put those back on without the woman noticing? Theo met his eyes, and both boys knew they had an understanding. Theo danced the money bag back onto the stage, finished his song, and said, "Thank you, kind audience, for allowing me to play." Then he took a bow and tossed his violin high up into the air. The entire crowd gasped, looking up. As gently as possibly, Carter slipped the earrings into the lady's handbag. Theo caught the violin with ease, and everyone began to applaud. Patting their pants, the pickpockets finally realized that Theo and Carter had outsmarted and out-pickpocketed them. The singing quartet glared daggers at the 2 boys, and they slunk away from the gazebo with only their bag of tips. Theo and Carter shrugged, then burst into laughter. They were so distracted that neither noticed the slim woman dressed in a slinky black dress and a pillbox hat with a web-like veil over her face. She stared at them, her fingers twitching like spider mandibles chewing a meal. That will be the end of our chapter. We'll stay tuned for next time.